Hello and welcome to Express Sports Podcast. You're listening to Game Time. On Friday, Rashmi Rocket, which I believe is one of the first Indian movies to deal with the complex subject of gender testing in sport, was released. Now, gender testing is one of the burning issues in global sport today, and we've had instances in the past where Indian athletes have been at the center of it. This movie is about a small town girl, Rashmi, played by Taapsee Pannu, who becomes a national level athlete but then is asked to undergo a gender test, which leads to a larger discussion on human rights among many other issues. To understand what went behind writing a movie on such a sensitive subject, we have with us today Aniruddha Guha, the writer of the movie Rashmi Rocket. Anirudh and I spoke about the challenges of dealing with a subject with the seriousness it deserves while also keeping the audience entertained and engaged. We also spoke about why Indian cinema struggles to get sport right and if Rashmi Rocket is based on any real life character from Indian sport. So, without wasting any more time, let's jump right into our conversation. Anirudh, thank you so much. It's great to have you here. Like we were discussing just before we started our recording, it's great to be completing this full circle, isn't it? Like we were together on one side और अभी आपने सरहद पार करके उस तरफ चले गए to the other side of the divide. How's सरहद पार ही हो गया हमारे लिए तो. How's the transition been? I mean, first of all, great. Congratulations on Rashmi Rocket, but the transition must have been fantastic.
No, it wasn't because the moment I made the transition, I started making more money to begin with.
Thanks for rubbing it, man. Thanks for rubbing it.
So, no, I'm not rubbing it in. I'm just round realities. But listen, I have to tell audiences this that talking to Mihir right now is making me very nostalgic because Mihir and I worked in a very buzzing newsroom about 14, 15 years ago. And for many years after that as well. I think we were in the same newsroom when India won the World Cup.
And that was quite fantastic, yeah.
And I mean, I don't think that as sports lovers, you can have a more lasting impression of being there, doing that, and being part of a newsroom on a Saturday night as it is happening. You're watching it, but you're also reporting it. And it's just such a crazy, crazy feeling, right? So even now, I know you're sitting in the Express newsroom and it's making me nostalgic because I think it's just reminding me of having that crazy vibe of the newsroom. But to answer your question, Mihir, I think I'm glad I quit journalism at the time I did. Because also, see, I was a film critic, right? And I was largely writing on cinema. And I don't mean to be critical or anything of that sort, but I feel like there has been a slide in the quality of journalism over the past 4, 5 years. And it's got nothing to do with the people themselves. It's also how organizations are running themselves, etc., etc. I think there is a lot less emphasis on copy and reportage and digging deep and coming out with stories and giving the best representation of a story possible. I think it's become very clickbaity, very just like put three things together and put it out there kind of stuff. It's not like I preempted it or foreshadowed or anything. I just quit because I remember I had been a film critic for 10 years and I had loved it. And I was drawn to writing screenplays and scripts. This was around 2016. So I was very happy to make the transition because it brought about a change in lifestyle. Because suddenly I realized I became my own boss. You know, I could work at my own pace. And I feel that writers need that. Writers need space. They need freedom. It can't be a cluttered lifestyle. You know, it's fine if you're not doing, we are very hard on ourselves in terms of our productivity. And every day we want to like churn out stuff. I'm saying it's okay if you don't churn out stuff every day. It's okay if you have less productive days, but it's the mindset. So, you know, when you're working at a office with so many people around you and it's a corporate setup, whatever you might do, it's always going to be difficult. At least for me, it was to get in the mindset of really, really doing writing. You know what I mean? Going beyond the 2000 words, 3000 word articles we were writing once a week, which had its own joy. It was great because I got validation every Thursday and Friday when my reviews went out on social media. I would be sharing it and people would be getting in touch with me and say, "Arey, tera ye review pada." There would be disagreements. Now there is a lull in the sense that now again with Rashmi Rocket coming out, I am enjoying a Friday because it's like again there is validation, there is conversation and all of that. So I feel that dopamine hit was on a slightly weekly basis. And now it's once in a while, but it's okay. I don't miss it so much because I'm really enjoying what I'm doing right now.
No, of course, I'm sure it's a very different lifestyle. I mean, I don't know if the grass is greener or it's not. It's
Let me
tempting.
tell you, it is greener.
well, well, we can debate that
But Mihir,
forever and
before
ever.
we continue, I have to say that I admire journalists like you because we started out at the same time. I don't know too many people of our who started out at the same time as we did and have continued to stick to their guns and do what they love.
Well, because I mean, you get paid to watch sports, so I don't think I can complain a lot about that.
Exactly. And that's what I loved about being a journalist. I was getting paid to watch movies.
Yeah, and now you're writing one. Now you're writing one, and coming to that, it is very interesting. I haven't seen the movie. In fact, the day we are recording, it's a Tuesday, and a couple of hours from now, your premiere is scheduled, if I'm not wrong. Rashmi Rocket, huh? I mean, rather than me giving out spoilers or anything, why don't you tell us what the movie is about?
I mean, if you watch the trailer, you would have gotten a pretty good sense of it. It's about an athlete who comes from Kutch, track and field athlete whose star is on the rise, and she brings the country glory in some form. And it looks like her career is going to take off to another level, which is when she is put through a gender test. Now, of course, to audiences who are not aware about it, a gender testing is something that's very common across sports and across countries. So it's not an Indian specific issue where essentially female athletes who the authorities have some sort of a doubt about in terms of their performance, or it's the analogy of somebody who's a brilliant performer and you put them through a performance and answer test just to, sort of do away with all doubts about why their performance is as great as they are. And essentially, that's how gender testing is used. And there are several reasons why it's done. Sometimes it's done to purely, it's called a sex test to figure out the actual gender of the individual, which means that the person who might be running in the women's category may not even be a woman, might identify as a transgender or an intersex or one of those genders. And then there is the whole thing about the level of testosterone in your bloodstream, right? Which essentially gives you a so called advantage over other female athletes who might have the average testosterone level in their body. So these are various aspects of gender testing. They all happen for different reasons. I'm not going to reveal why we do it in the film, but you'll have to watch it to know that. But essentially, that happens at a crucial juncture in the film. She gets banned from the sport because she fails the gender test. And as you would have seen in the trailer, she decides to take the entire federation to court, saying that there's been a violation of her human rights. So that's pretty much the one line. I mean, not a one line because I spoke more than that, but this is the plot of Rashmi Rocket, so to speak.
A lot of our listeners might be wondering why we are talking about the movie in a sports podcast. Well, very frankly, the reason for it is that this particular issue is a burning topic right now in sports world. It was dominated in the Olympics, in the build-up to the Olympics. We have had athletes like Cassius Semenya, or even back home, we have athletes like Duti Chand who have been taking on the system, fighting for their rights. And Aniruddha, I know, is a huge sports fan. He has done his research. Although it's a test, Anirudh, how the movie eventually shapes up. I'm sure it'll be nice. I'm just pulling your leg.
No, I am totally looking forward to see. For me, there are going to be two kinds of responses that are going to come. One is the audience response, which is going to not care about the authenticity of it. They are just going to look for a good drama, a good story, and some novelty and newness. That part I'm quite feeling good about. I'm confident about that. Then comes the other part of it, which is people like you. There are two kinds of movies you make, right? One are made purely for entertainment purposes. And for me, Rashmi Rocket is not just that film. It's more than just, I mean, I would like to believe it's a compelling, engaging drama and all of those things, but it is an issue that me, my director, Akash Khurana, all of us really strongly believe in. So does the lead actor, Taapsee Pannu, which is why she signed on to do it even before we came on board. She was among the first few people who signed up on it. Because we believe that through gender testing, it's not so much just about it's that is just a layer. It is the starting off point to have larger discussions about gender in society, about identity in society, about sexual orientation in society. Because in India, especially, this is so much more relevant, even though it happens across the world, because we do not have the concept of gender in our culture. You see, we don't have gender studies in our syllabus growing up. Even the LGBTQI plus movement is something that has only recently taken off, and even then, it is restricted to the metros. So there's a large part of the country which is completely untouched by it. And ever since, from the time we are born as little kids, we are put into boxes. Boys are supposed to do a certain number of things, girls are supposed to do a certain number of things. Boys don't cry, for example. They can't show emotion. They can't show because then it means they're weak. Women should not be doing things that men do, like riding bikes or going on treks or whatever it is that you feel in the larger patriarchal system women are not supposed to do. So what I was trying to say, Meir, is that that's the response that I'm looking forward to even more. I want to know what female athletes think about the film, irrespective of whether they were put through a gender test or not. Because we are trying to touch upon slightly bigger themes through the story of gender testing.
So there are plenty of threads to pick on from what you said, Anirudh. But there's this one doubt, one question I've had in my mind ever since I saw the trailer, and that is while you were writing the script, while you were researching for it, and now finally when it's about to hit the big screen, is it based or is it kind of inspired from any real life athlete or real life character in India, or is it a completely fictional character that you've created?
So the way it works is that the framework of the story is based on several real life incidents. Now, if I have to give you a very basic example, if you're making a film on match fixing, right, and say it is not based on the 2000 match fixing scandal, you are still going to do your research and borrow certain things that because you want to make your story realistic, right? So there has been match fixing happening over the last 20 years. Now, if I choose to tell a fictional story about this one athlete, one sports person, one cricketer who's indulged in match fixing, I think it would be reductive to assume that this is based on, say, an Azharuddin, right? Unless I am surrounding the story with several elements, which makes it absolutely, there leaves no doubt in an audience's mind कि हाँ ये तो अजहरुद्दीन की ही कहानी हो सकती है. You see, then that makes sense. So gender testing as a concept is common. Firstly, we know about the bigger cases because there are two reasons for that. One is because these athletes who were put through gender testing, who we know about, were achievers, right? They had performed at an international or national level. So when they were put through a gender test, it made national news and we found out about that. That's how I found about gender testing as well. So I was introduced to the concept of gender testing through those stories. But when my research began, and as I dig deeper, and I found out that there are sports psychologists, there are sports doctors around the world who have written reports on the pros and cons of gender testing. And even in India, I realized that in the smaller states, there are incidents of athletes being gender tested and then either facing stigma. I know of an incidence of a female athlete who was put through the gender test and then the village outcast her, like threw her out of the village. And I also know of somebody who's made suicide attempts. So you see, that's what I was trying to say earlier, which is that in a country like India, the implications are more than just losing out on your career. That is one. That anyway screws with your self confidence and mental health and all of that. But then comes the second, more lethal part of it, which is A, how the media covers it because they have no idea about what gender testing is, and B, how your immediate society responds to it. Because their whole deal is what does that mean? If you have a testosterone level that's higher than the average female, that's just your genetic makeup. It doesn't mean anything. But you put the terms gender test to it and say the person has failed the gender test or the sex determination test or any of those terms. The thought goes is she not a woman then? And then it leads to stigma in society. So to answer your question, there are several cases that we came across and we tried to bring those stories in. Even when you watch the movie, you'll realize that we have referenced them. Also, because we are setting the film in a courtroom for a very specific reason. Because when our lawyer is making his points in court, he's putting light on all these incidents as well. So we're not shocked away from it, or we're not saying that it is their story or it's based on their life or anything. The original story, of course, was given to me by a gentleman called Nenda Peresami, who wrote the original story, and then Akash and The character of Rashmi and the setting and everything had been set, but the added elements were brought in by me in the script.
So then, Anirudh, I mean, it is a very sensitive subject, and we've seen in the past that when it comes to touchy, sensitive subjects, well, Indian cinema hasn't had a great history with it. So how tough is it to tread that line where you want the audience to be entertained while at the same time also tell the story which is very serious in a sensitive manner? I mean, in a sensitive manner. How tough is it to kind of tread that line?
It all comes down to a very simple thing, which is your sensibility as a human. And I think what really worked for me in the case of Rashmi Rocket was that the director was Akash Khurana, who I feel the two of us somehow share the same wavelength in many ways. Our opinions on society, our opinions on the world at large, we share them, which is also possibly why he felt I would be the best guy to write this because we've had a friendship and mutual admiration before. So the whole approach from day one, like when we met the first day, was very clear that, I told Akash that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. You are never going to get to make a story about gender testing twice. You can make an action film twice. It doesn't work the first time and you can do it again. You can make a thriller twice. You can make them multiple times. But you can't tell the story of gender testing again, right? You can't like screw it up and say, this time I'll fix it. It's not going to happen. We're also the first guys to do it, right? So it comes with a certain sense of responsibility. So to answer your question, Mihir, while I agree with you about the way these things have been dealt with in the past, I can't really either. I'm not going to come out here and say, "Kani humne to alag approach here," or any of that. The whole thing is, Mihir, that I have stayed true to my understanding as a writer about how these concepts need to be communicated to audiences. And a lot of the points that you raised were already subconsciously part of our writing process.
No, so that's why I'm very fascinated with the whole subject and the way you approached it. I mean, I won't impose my opinions on you. I would rather pick your brains. What's your take on how Bollywood, Indian movies has kind of taken on sports subjects and dealt with it? I mean, we see a lot of times, like we saw in Bhag Milkha or in Dangal, where certain parts are kind of taken and exaggerated. I mean, using that, what I feel is a very convenient phase of creative liberty, but then you start kind of going away from the truth, from the facts. Now, I'm not saying that about Rashmi Rocket per se, but what does that tell you about Indian cinema and the way they look at sports in general?
There's a little difference. Both the movies that you mentioned were biopics, right? Where rights were bought of the people whose stories were being told. Now, you can sit and debate and say, okay, was this really their story? Are they even happy with it? How much creative liberty did the director to take with their stories? Those can be debated at length, right? I'm in agreement with you about the fact that there are times where we tend to veer away from the real story because there are these trappings that you have. And for me, actually, it was not a challenge. It is actually what excited me to write this. Because that's what I was trying to get at earlier is that I disliked Bhag Milkha Bhag, and I can say that now, but I loved Dangal. And my reasons for both are very different. I am not just going by the messaging and all of that. Those things are important, no doubt about that. But there's some craft in storytelling in Dangal. You know what I mean? Something as simple as the fact that you know that the male protagonist has been so dominating throughout the movie that in the climax of the film he's shut away in a room and the girl has to win the battle on her own merit without the support of her father. We can debate about whether I'm just saying from a movie storytelling point of view, not from the point of view of what really happened. I'm saying there is that much awareness that for it to become her victory, it is necessary for the father to not be around. Now, what happens with the father, you can debate saying कि अरे it's so filmy उसको एक room में बंद कर दिया and all of that. That is fine. Those we can sit and talk about. But I'm talking about intention more than execution.
No, so that's where my counterpoint comes here. Like when we talk about, okay, I understand, I gave two examples which are kind of biopics, which are biopics. But then you, on the other hand, look at something like a Foxcatcher, which is also a biopic, but which kind of stays true to the story, what happened. And it can make for a very dull viewing, but it is fact and it is extremely engrossing as well. I don't know if you've seen Foxcatcher.
Foxcatcher as a genre would not qualify as a sports film at all. I feel there are movies which are sports films, and there are movies where sports is a backdrop. You know what I'm trying to say? I mean, it's a very thin line, but when I say a sports film, the outcome of the story is heavily dependent on the outcome of the sport itself. To give a simple example, the Rocky series. Unless Rocky wins the bout at the end of the movie is not complete. But then there's also the Cinderella Man, which is a boxing film but takes a completely different approach. There is Warrior, which is a story about MMA, but the MMA is only a backdrop to tell the story of a completely dysfunctional family. So would you call Warrior a sports film? Yeah, you probably would, but it's not a sports film in the strictest sense of the term. So even Foxcatcher, based on a real life story, I think the plot and the interaction between the characters is more important to me than the actual sport itself. And that's why we watch Foxcatcher. Bring it back to Rashmi Rocket. It's a good thing that you brought up because I don't see Rashmi Rocket as a sports film.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I wanted to ask you. Do you see that as a sports film or a sports as
Sports
a...
is the backdrop of the film. Because I can't tell this story if it is not set against the sporting world. You see, so the setup of the story is sports because you want to get the audience in and understand the world that you belong to. Then it turns into a completely issue based film, right? It turns into a concept drama. It turns into a story about concepts that we are not very comfortable talking about. And how do you find a way to represent those on screen, ending in the courtroom drama format? So you see now, some people might come out and say कि ये तो courtroom film. Some people might come out and say कि ये तो issue based film. So it was very deliberate on our part that when the promotions were happening, when she was shooting for the film and the script was announced, the movie was announced, if you see, all the earlier posters was just her on the track field. So everybody just assumed that Rashmi Rocket is a film about an athlete and it's going to be a very basic average sports drama with all the common highs and lows you see in all these films.
Right.
But the moment the trailer landed, it changed people's perspective about the film.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of am also interested to see how the running sequences are in the movie. I know as a writer that might not be completely under your purview, but how easy or tough is it to get those things right? I mean, for example, considering that Taapsee, is she a middle distance runner, a long distance runner? I don't know what
She's a sprinter. She's a
sprinter. All
So,
right,
so
so
she's so it's 100, 200, and 400. So the thing is that you're absolutely right because those are some of the joys of writing sports films and what you enjoy, right? Because it's like forget me writing it as an audience. I'll give you two really quick examples. We had seen so many Rocky films that after a point you knew how it's going to play out. But when he gets defeated, right, there is a very simple thing that his coach says that you need to switch to southpaw because that's weak and the opponent is used to making a game plan against your right jab. So the entire climax was him getting beaten, getting beaten, getting beaten, and say now unleash the southpaw. And that's a high, right? Because see, there is sporting sensibility in it, there is logic in it, but at the same time, it also gives you a real high as a viewer because it's like, oh, damn, this happened, right? Another quick example is Chak De India, where he basically benches the character of Vindhya because she's a bit of a rogue. She's a bit of a bad apple and all of that, but she's the most experienced player. And there are cold vibes between her and the coach. And what he does is that in the semi final match, where she does not expect to be put into the game and everybody thinks she's not going to play, he announces her as the. So the way it works is that the opposition has not created any game plan for her. So you see, again, it gives you a high as a viewer, but there is sporting logic to it as well. So in Rashmi Rocket, it was that. See, it's a 13-second sport. How much drama can you create within 13 seconds? Once it begins, it's over before you know it. So can you create a drama at the 6-second mark? You can't. It's too late. Like in a hockey match, you get 70 minutes. You could be 4-0 down, but you could still find a way to win 5-4. You can have the first half, second half. But So we have come up with certain, I had to figure out how to make those bits interesting. You'll probably have to watch it in the film because I don't want to give it away. But yes, at the writing level as well, we tried to bring in whatever drama you could infuse within the 100, 200, 400 setup. And then, of course, like you rightly pointed out, it depends on how it's been shot and directed. And you can see that Taapsee is obviously given it her all. She's trained in it. It's not just about her physical transformation, she's trained as an athlete.
That's what I wanted to ask you. And before I come to that one last question, I'd like to bring in our producer Shashank if he has something to ask, because he generally has very different point of view on sporting things in general than us. So Shashank?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I was immediately like, one thing that did come to my mind obviously was Duty Chand, right? Like, I had followed Duty Chand's story, and it was just, I mean, it's such a bizarre thing, and not a lot of people, like Aniruddha, you mentioned, not a lot of people understand it. Like, what does it mean to fail a gender test? And does that mean that person is not a woman? Does that mean it's a man? It completely like messes your head and makes you question so many things that you don't know. But one thing, Anirudh, I was curious about, like you were first a film critic and then you became a film writer. Was that an added pressure for you? Because often critics, and wrongly so, are dismissed like, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to write films or make films, but you're going to write about and criticize other people. So did writing about films and then writing films themselves, was there an added pressure when you were doing
You know, maybe this question would have made sense 5 years ago when I wrote my first script. There was a very slight amount of pressure. I don't think there was pressure. I was curious because I would go from being a guy who would check reviews on Friday to see what my colleagues are saying about the same film that I have written about, to now being a guy reading those same people writing about something I have written. So there was more of discord there than anything else. So I had to detach myself from that entire process. But if I can be extremely honest with you, Shashank, I have realized that we are a country of 1.4 billion people. And I said this even when I was a reviewer. So I told people that, look, it's my job to write about a film through a certain lens that I have. A lot of people will agree with it. A lot of people may not agree with it, but might still appreciate it. And I think that's what's more important. Good reviewing, good criticism in any sector is not about whether you agree with it or not. It's about whether you can see it from that person's point of view and say, I don't agree with this, but this person makes sense. So that was my approach at that point of time. So when I switched, that didn't change in my head. Like, I mean, I know the intentions behind what I am putting out there. Some of it is going to land, some of it is not going to land. I feel, in fact, I'm better prepared to deal with differing opinions because I realized that I had differing opinions from a lot of people. And I think that's a very natural human tendency to. I feel that when there are 300 people sitting in an auditorium and watching the film, it's never going to be that all 300 people feel the exact same way about the film. They may all like it, they may all hate it, some may like it, some may hate it, but they will all feel slightly differently about different things. So, I mean, man, I have to be very honest with you, I take it with a pinch of salt. That is not to say that I do not respect reviewers or critics or their points of view. I look forward to it and I will be looking forward to it. But I am saying that even when I wrote and I would get a very harsh response, I would say, boss, chill. It's a review. Take it with a pinch of salt. So when I expected people to take my reviews with a pinch of salt, why can't I do the same with for my own films? But having said that, I am very curious about Rashmi Rocket because I'll be very honest with you. I am bullish about the film. Now that might change on Friday when it comes out, 3 days from now. But I have not written too many scripts where even when I have got good internal response, where people say that they like it, I am still not fully sold on it until I know what the audience feels. I can detach from the process and say, okay, I have made something now. Let's see on Friday. People will tell us whether it's a good film, bad film, entertaining, not. But in the case of Rashmi Rocket, even before it goes out to the audience, I'm bloody proud of it. So there is a greater sense of accomplishment in having written and executed the film. So the pressure on how it is received is lesser because I think that will just be a bonus. So if there is a positive response, that will just add to the joy. But like sitting here today on a Tuesday, not knowing how the film is going to do 3 days from now, I feel good about having written this film. And I think that's more important than anything else.
No, I'm pretty sure, Anirudh, if the movie isn't half as good as the reviews you wrote as a journalist, I think you'll be sorted on Friday and beyond Friday as well.
Well, you guys have to watch it and tell me what you all think.
Sure thing, sure thing. Just one last thing before I let you go. I said that you mentioned about Taapsee's training and the kind of effort she put in. Did she run 100 meters and what was her timing? Did you guys record that at all?
You know what? The entire film was shot in a lot of distress. It was shot at the peak of the pandemic.
Okay.
This was in the pre-vaccination phase. So this is a really good question. I have to go and check back with the production crew and get back to you on it. I do know that on the day of wrap up, where I wasn't there, on the day of wrap up, they got the entire crew. They organized for like an event where everyone competed against each other. Everyone was made to run. I don't know what Taapsee's time was, but I can find out and get back to you.
Brilliant. We wait for that and we wait for the movie for all sorts of things from the entertainment point of view as well as from the sports science point of view of it. Thanks a lot, Aniruddha, for joining us today. It's great having you and great catching up with you after such a long time.
Yeah, Mihir, imagine now I need to come on Zoom calls to get to say hi to you.
That's how things change when you become a big shot writer, Aniruddha.
Oh, damn. That's all at the end of it.
Yeah, thanks a lot and thanks for listening to us.
Thanks, Mihir. This was great fun.
You were listening to Express Sports by the Indian Express. This week's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.